Her hands were on the kitchen counter at 6 in the morning, and the soup pot was in front of her, and the lien paperwork was on the table behind her, because she had not been able to look at it again, and she had not been able to put it away. 22 hours. That was what remained. The process server had come Monday. It was now early Thursday. The foreclosure clock had been running for 66 hours, and it had 22 left, and the number attached to stopping it was $34,000. And the number in her savings account was $2,800, and the distance between those two numbers was the distance between the house on Aldermore Street in Millhaven, Michigan, and everything else. She was 77 years old. She had been in this house for 39 years. She had raised her children in it and buried her husband from it and tended her garden behind it through 39 springs and summers, and she had never in 39 years missed a payment on anything. She was going to lose it in 22 hours, not because she had been careless, not because she had failed at anything, because her husband had been sick and the bills had been large, and the system that was supposed to help had helped as far as it went, and then a collections firm in Grand Rapids had bought the remainder for 11 cents on the dollar and had grown it with fees until it became a lien on a school nurse's house, and the lien had matured on a Monday in October, and nobody had called to tell her until the process server was already at the door. She put both hands flat on the counter. She stood there in the 6 o'clock kitchen with the soup pot in front of her, and the paperwork behind her, and the Thursday that had been Thursday for 39 years arranged around her, the cast iron, the light through the east window, the sound of the street coming awake outside, and she breathed. 2 streets over, in a house that had belonged to a woman named Margaret Briggs, until February, a man was already up. The Elm Street Diner sat at the corner of Elm and 3rd in Millhaven the way corner diners are supposed to sit. Like it had grown there, like the sidewalk had been poured around it. It was open at 5:30 for the trades and by 6:30 for the regulars, and all day after that for whoever needed it, in the specific order of a place that understood that a town's working hours were not all the same, and that the diner's job was to be present for all of them. The smell was coffee, and the particular sweetness of a short-order kitchen that had been feeding people since the same administration that installed the current cash register, which was not recent. The counter had 8 stools. The booths had vinyl seats that had been recovered twice in the diner's history, both times in the same dark green, because the owner had decided that some things were correct and did not require revision. It was the kind of diner that people who live in small towns understand instinctively, and that people who do not live in small towns sometimes drive past twice before seeing. The sign was small, the parking was the street. You found it because someone told you it was there, or because you walked past it enough times to finally go in, or because you were the kind of person who noticed small things on corners and understood them as invitations. Calder Briggs had been the third kind. He had come to Millhaven 11 years ago to see about his mother, who had begun the particular declining that parents do when they have reached the age at which the body starts making decisions without consulting the person inside it. He had come back twice a year for 11 years, checking on the house, checking on Margaret, driving from Traverse City on the same stretch of US 31 each time, arriving on the same Thursday morning schedule, because Thursday was the day the chapter's weekly meeting didn't fall on, and Thursday was therefore the day that belonged to his mother. He had found the Elm Street Diner on the first Thursday. He had been coming back to it on every Thursday in Millhaven for 11 years. Margaret Briggs had died in February. She had died in the way his father had told him she would die, on her own terms, in her own bedroom, with her affairs arranged in the specific order of a woman who had worked as a bookkeeper for 40 years and had applied the same discipline to her death that she had applied to her quarterly filings. She had left Calder the house, which he had not sold, because selling it required deciding what it meant to sell it, and in February and March and April and now October, he had not been ready for that decision. He came to Millhaven on Thursdays because the habit was already there, and because the alternative was to stop coming, and stopping coming was its own kind of decision, and he was not ready for that one either. He was 52 years old, wide through the shoulders, dark-haired going silver at the temples in the specific pattern of a man who went gray early and has spent enough years with it to carry it without self-consciousness. His cut bore the Lake Country chapter, Traverse City. Chapter president for 8 years, 12 years total in the chapter, The kind of president whose authority came not from the title, but from the specific quality of his presence, which was the quality of a man who made decisions with the full weight of their consequences understood in advance, and who lived with the ones that turned out to be wrong without looking for someone else to hold them. He was in the second booth from the door with his coffee at 7:14 when June came over with the pot. June had been at the Elm Street Diner for 16 years. She was 63 years old, and she knew the regulars the way a person knows things they have been paying attention to for a long time. Not just their orders, but the difference between their Thursday face and their Tuesday face, the specific way a person holds their coffee when something is sitting with them, the quality of silence that is different from the quality of silence that is comfortable. She refilled his cup. She hesitated. "You know Nona Calloway?" she said. He looked up. He did not know the name. "Should I?" "Aldermore Street," June said. "She was school nurse at Millhaven Elementary for 31 years. She paused. "My kids both had her. Everybody's kids had her. What about her?" June set the coffee pot on the table. She sat across from him in the booth, which she had never done, which told him something. Her husband Franklin died 4 years ago, left some medical bills. The insurance covered most of it, but there was a remainder. She thought it was being handled. Turns out it was sold to some collection company. She got a process server at her door Monday. Calder looked at his coffee. "How much?" $34,000. June looked at the table. "She's got until tomorrow morning." He looked at her. "She asked for help?" "She wouldn't," June said. "That's not how Nona is." She paused. "I only know because my neighbor is on her street and saw the server, and Nona told her not to say anything." Another pause. "My neighbor told me." Calder set his cup down. "Who's the collections firm?" Before we go any further, if you're finding this channel for the first time tonight, hit subscribe and drop your city and state in the comments. I want to know where this story reaches, because I believe it needs to go as far as it can go. I read every single comment. Now, back to Calder, back to that booth and that question, because the answer June gave him was the beginning of the last 18 hours, and it started the way it always starts, not with a hero who arrived on a horse, but with a man who asked one question and didn't like the answer. Her name was Nona Ruth Calloway, and she had gone by Nona since she was 4, when she had decided that the full Ruth was too formal for the way she intended to move through the world, and the choice had turned out to be accurate. She was 77 years old. 4'11", which she had been since she was 16, and which she had never found inconvenient, because in 31 years of being the school nurse at Millhaven Elementary, she had spent most of her time at the level of children, and at that level 4'11" was sufficient for any purpose. She had gray hair she wore short. She had the specific competent calm of a person who has spent decades in rooms where children are frightened and has learned to be the room's anchor without announcing herself as one. She had been a school nurse because she had known at 19 that she wanted to be in a school, and had known at 21 that what a school needed most was someone who was there for the children who needed something that was not a teacher, not instruction, not curriculum, a person. She had been that person for 31 years at Millhaven Elementary, which meant that a significant portion of Millhaven's adult population had sat in her office at some point, for a scraped knee, for a fever, for the specific constellation of symptoms that was never about a stomachache and always about something at home, and had received from her the particular combination of practical attention and human warmth that she had deployed without variation for 31 years. She had married Franklin Calloway in June of 1986. He had been a mechanical engineer at a firm in Traverse City, a man of exact and patient temperament who had loved Nona with the specific quality of love that recognizes what it has found and makes no fuss about. It simply continues. He had built her the raised garden bed in the backyard the spring after they moved in, because she had mentioned she wanted one once and he had not forgotten. He had been in that bed with her every April until the year he could not be. He had died in the spring, which she had been glad of, because he had loved the spring and it seemed right. She made soup. This was her specific and carrying fact every Thursday, in the cast iron pot that had been her mother's before hers, from whatever was in season and whatever needed using, not from a recipe, from knowledge accumulated across decades of knowing what goes with what needs time and what doesn't, what a pot of soup does for a house on an October Thursday when everything outside is going spare and gray. She had been making it for 50 years. She had made it the Thursday after Franklin's funeral. She had made it every Thursday since. She was standing at the counter at 6 in the morning because she had not been able to sleep past 4, and because the paperwork on the table was going to be there whether she slept or not, and because the soup pot was already washed and waiting on the stove, and she had decided, somewhere between 4 and 6, that she was going to make the soup. This was going to be a Thursday. Whatever else happened, it was going to be a Thursday. She had already called her daughter in Chicago. She had not told her daughter the full amount. She had said there was a situation with some of Franklin's old medical bills and she was working it out, which was almost a lie except that she was, in fact, working it out. She had called her bank on Tuesday and been told what she already knew. She had called a legal aid number she found online and reached a voicemail. She had called her county commissioner's office and been asked to call back during business hours. She was working it out. She had simply not located a solution yet. She had not called her son in Detroit. Her son had his own situation and she was not going to add to it. She put the onions in the pot. She heard the process server's voice again the way she had been hearing it since Monday. The specific detached, courtesy of a man delivering paperwork he did not write and did not endorse and had no opinion about, who had handed her the documents and said ma'am and gone back to his car. The courtesy of a system that was polite about what it was doing to her. She put the celery in. She put both hands on the counter. 39 years in this kitchen. The collections firm was named Meridian Asset Recovery, and it was headquartered in Grand Rapids, and the man in charge of the Callaway file was a collections manager named Harris Volk. He was 45 years old, and he had been in debt acquisition for 16 years, and he had the specific certainty of a man whose job required him to understand that the numbers were the numbers, and the process was the process, and that applying sentiment to either was a category error that served no one. He had applied this understanding with consistency across 16 years, and had not been wrong about it in the sense that mattered to him, which was the operational sense, the sense in which the numbers came out right. He had not been to Millhaven. He did not know what Millhaven looked like. He knew the address, the lien amount, the date, and the account number. The account had been purchased at 11 cents on the dollar from the original medical billing servicer 18 months ago. The fees had accrued according to the terms that were at every stage technically legal. The 24-hour notice was the legally required notice. The process server had delivered it on the legally required timeline. Harris Volk had not done anything that was not permitted. That was the specific quality of his confidence. He would be in his office on Thursday morning when the deadline ran. He would be in his office on Friday morning when the file moved to the next stage. He had 7 other files in the same stage. It was a Thursday, like any other Thursday. He did not know about Calder Briggs in the second booth at the Elm Street Diner. He did not know about June with the coffee pot. He did not know about the 3 phone calls being made from the diner's parking lot at 7:40, 1 in the morning in the October cold, by a man who had finished his coffee and left a 20 on the table and gone to his bike and stood beside it and made 3 calls without sitting down. He did not know about any of it. He did not need to. That was what he believed. Calder's first call was to a man named Errol Pace, who was a retired attorney in Traverse City, with 30 years of consumer protection and debt practice behind him and a specific informed anger about debt acquisition firms that had been building since 2009 and had not diminished. Errol answered on the second ring because Calder Briggs calling before 8 in the morning on a Thursday meant something. Calder described the situation in 8 sentences. Errol listened without interrupting. Michigan usury law, Errol said. The fees Meridian charged on a debt this age have a ceiling. If they've exceeded it, the lien is challengeable. Can you look at it today? Send me the paperwork. I don't have the paperwork. A woman named Nona Callaway has it. She's on Aldermore Street in Millhaven. She doesn't know I'm calling you. Errol was quiet for 3 seconds. I'll call her directly, he said. Give me 2 hours. Calder's second call was to his chapter's vice president in Traverse City. He said what he said. Millhaven, Aldermore Street, a school nurse, 39 years, 22 hours. He did not say come. He said the thing and let the thing speak. The vice president said, how many do you need? Calder said, however many want to. He made the third call to a man in Petoskey. He was off the phone by 7:53. He stood in the parking lot for a moment in the October cold. He looked at the diner window, where June was visible inside, refilling someone's coffee. He thought about Nona Calloway in her kitchen with the soup pot and the paperwork and the clock that had been running since Monday. He got on the breakout. He rode the 2 streets to Aldermore. He knocked at 819. She came to the door in the way of a woman who was not expecting anyone and had decided that whoever was there was going to find her presentable anyway, because that was the standard she maintained regardless. She was in her house dress and her good slippers, and she had her hair done, and she looked at him, at the cut, at the size of him, at the particular face of a man who has come to her door with something on his mind, and she did what Nona Calloway had been doing for 77 years when confronted with something she did not have a category for. She assessed it. "Are you lost?" she said. "No," he said. "I'm Calder Briggs. I've got a house on Maple, 2 streets over. My mother's house." She looked at him. "Margaret's son," she said. He nodded. She opened the door wider. He stepped in. The house smelled like onions and celery, and the specific warmth of a cast-iron pot that has been on a stove since early morning, and underneath that, the smell of 39 years of a house being lived in by people who took care of it. She led him to the kitchen. The paperwork was still on the table. She did not move it, and she did not apologize for it being there. She was not a woman who apologized for the facts of her situation. He sat at the table. He looked at the paperwork. He looked at the pot on the stove. "I know about the lien," he said. She looked at him. "June told me," he said. She closed her eyes for 1 second. She opened them. She shouldn't have. "She was worried," he said. "The whole town's worried. They just don't know they are yet." Nona looked at the paperwork. She looked at the pot. "It's Franklin's bills," she said. "He wouldn't have wanted." She stopped. "I know," Calder said. She looked at him. "You don't know." "My mother died in February," he said. "I know what it means to manage someone left behind." He paused. "I've got a lawyer looking at the lien right now, Errol Pace. If there's a legal challenge, he'll find it." She sat down at the table, not because she had decided to, but because her legs had. "And if there isn't one," she said. Calder looked at the soup pot. He looked at the paperwork. He looked at the woman across the table who had spent 31 years being the room's anchor for other people's children, and who was sitting in her own kitchen with the clock running and the pot on the stove, and the specific composure of a person who has decided that composure is a form of dignity, and dignity is not negotiable. He said, "Then we'll figure out what else there is." She looked at him. She said, "Why?" He thought about June with the coffee pot. He thought about Margaret's house 2 streets over, still unsold, still holding the shape of a woman who had died in February with her affairs in order. He thought about the specific quality of a Thursday that had been Thursday for 39 years. "Because you made soup this morning," he said, "and the clock is still running, and neither of those things should be happening in the same sentence." She was quiet for a long time. The pot moved on the stove, not dramatically, the small particular sound of a cast-iron pot that has been heating for 2 hours and is ready. She looked at the clock on the wall. She looked at the paperwork. She looked at Calder. "You want a bowl while we wait?" she said. Errol Pace called at 10:47. The Feast Meridian Asset Recovery had applied to the Calloway debt exceeded the statutory ceiling under Michigan consumer protection law by a margin that Errol described in the specific language of a man who had been angry about debt acquisition for 15 years as not close. The lien as constituted was challengeable. The amount was challengeable. With an emergency motion filed before the end of business, the foreclosure clock could be stopped. He had already drafted the motion. He filed it at 11:19. Nona sat at her kitchen table and listened to Calder relay the information, and she looked at the paperwork she had not been able to put away since Monday, and she, very quietly, "Franklin would have found this on his own." "He would have," Calder said. "He was that kind of man," she said. "I can tell," Calder said. She looked at him. "How can you tell?" He looked around the kitchen, at the cast-iron pot, at the raised garden bed visible through the window, dormant but tended, at the 39 years of care that a house holds when people have lived in it the right way. "A house shows you," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she got up and ladled 2 more bowls. The rumble reached Aldermore Street at 11:47. She heard it before she saw anything, low below the frequency of street sound, the kind of sound that arrives in the chest before the ears have processed it. She was at the kitchen window. She looked out at the street. She could not see them yet. Then she could. They came from the north end of Aldermore in formation 2 by 2, the October light catching the chrome in the specific way of October light, which is lower and more sideways than any other season's and which turns chrome the color of old silver. They were not fast. They moved at the pace of men who were arriving rather than passing through, which is a different pace, which you can read in the way the machines move when the men on them have decided where they are. 37 motorcycles filled Aldermore Street. They parked along both curbs, not blocking the driveways, not on the sidewalk, on the street, and the engines killed in sequence, and the silence that followed was the silence of 37 engines that had been running and were now not, which is a specific and weighted silence, the silence of something that has arrived at its destination. Nona was at the kitchen window with both hands on the counter. She looked at Calder, who was standing in the doorway to the kitchen. "You called them," she said. "Some of them called others," he said. She looked at the street, at 37 men standing beside their bikes in the October cold on Aldermore Street, which was her street, which was a street where this had never happened, where nothing louder than the mail carrier had arrived in 39 years, without being expected. "Why are they here?" she said. "Because the clock is still running," Calder said. "Until Errol's motion is heard, it's still running. They wanted to be here while it ran." She looked at the street. She looked at the men standing in it. She looked at the cast-iron pot on the stove. "I don't have enough soup," she said. Calder almost smiled. "You don't have to feed them. My mother would have," she said. He looked at her. He looked at the pot. "There's a diner on Elm and 3rd, he said. "June will know what to do." The motion was heard at 4:15 on Thursday afternoon in the Wexford County Circuit Court, via telephone, in an emergency proceeding, that Errol Pace had been in front of the same judge on enough occasions to secure on 4 hours' notice. The judge issued a temporary restraining order on the foreclosure proceeding. The lien, as constituted, was suspended pending a hearing on the fee calculation question, which was scheduled for the following month. Errol called Nona at 4:41. She was at her kitchen table. 37 men were on her street. June had arrived at noon with enough food from the diner to cover the situation, which June had managed with the specific efficiency of a woman who had been feeding people for 16 years and did not require extensive instruction about logistics. Nona answered the phone. She listened. She said, "What does that mean?" Errol said, "It means the house is yours, tonight and past tonight." She set the phone down on the table. She did not say anything. She sat at the table in the specific way of a person processing something that has been held off for so long that its resolution requires a moment of complete stillness before any other thing is possible. Then she stood up. She went to the kitchen window. She looked at 37 men on Aldermore Street. She raised one hand. She did not know if they could see it through the glass. It did not matter. It was for her as much as for them. The specific gesture of a woman who has something to communicate and who has learned, in 77 years, that the gesture is sometimes more honest than the word. Calder rode out of Millhaven at 6 o'clock. The motion was filed. The order was in place, and Errol's hearing was on the calendar. And Nona Calloway had soup on the stove, and her house on Aldermore Street, and 39 more years of Thursdays if she wanted them. He took US 31 north the way he always took it, toward Traverse City, the October evening coming down around him in the specific Michigan way, fast, a little cold, the lake on his right side invisible in the dark but present in the smell of the air, the particular smell of a great lake at the end of summer, when the warmth has left the water, but not yet left the air entirely. He thought about Margaret's house 2 streets from Nona's. He thought about February and the affairs in order and the bookkeeper's precision that his mother had applied to her departure. He thought about what it meant to sell the house, and whether selling it was the right word, and what the right word might be instead. He thought about a cast-iron pot that had been on a stove every Thursday for 39 years. He thought about what a house shows you when you know how to look. He was going to call Errol in the morning and ask about the hearing. He was going to call June and thank her for the food. He was going to ride to Millhaven on a Thursday in November and eat at the Elm Street Diner and then drive the 2 streets to Maple and sit in his mother's house for a while. Maybe he would know by then what the right word was. Maybe he would know when he got there. The breakout found the highway and opened up, and the lake smell came stronger. And the night was cold and clear and long in the way of October nights on the water, and the road went north. 22 hours. That was what Nona Calloway had when Thursday morning started. 22 hours before the thing she had built in 39 years was taken from her by a process she had not been warned about, by a number that was not supposed to be as large as it had become, by a system that was polite about what it was doing and did not require anyone to be cruel to accomplish the result. 22 hours. And then a man who had been eating at the diner on Elm and 3rd for 11 years asked one question, and the answer led to a phone call, and the phone call led to 3 more, and 3 more led to 37 motorcycles on a residential street in the October light, and 37 engines going quiet, and a woman at a kitchen window raising her hand. Some days the clock runs out on the wrong things. Some days someone stops it. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs to know that the right question gets asked sometimes, that there are people who ask it. Subscribe so you're here for the next story. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. And type Thursday in the comments if this one stayed with you. Because some things have been Thursday for 39 years, and they deserve to stay that way.